No! I grabbed his sleeve in the mud. I won't leave you. Liza, that's an order. You said I'm not your weakness. So don't make me act weak, I blurted out, my voice ringing with steel. He looked at me, his eyes a storm. Fear for me, pride, and the warmth of love in the midst of hell. Want to know how an office nerd like me ended up in this nightmare? It all started on a gray day. I, Lisa, am dragging my old Honda home at 11 p.m. It's pouring rain, the boss has me working overtime again, and life is a complete mess. But this night will change everything. I thought about the bills, about the cat tugging at the curtain again, about how I just wanted to fall into bed and let this day finally end. Nothing foreshadowed that in 15 minutes my dull life would turn into a Hollywood action movie. A bad one. A really bad one. I was driving through an industrial area, a shortcut. The headlights picked out rusty fences and wet asphalt from the darkness. The car smelled of stale coffee from a sippy mug and my despair. I turned on the radio, but it was playing some depressing ballad. I turned it off. The silence grew even louder. It was in this silence that I noticed them. First, in the rearview mirror, 2 pairs of headlights. Big, bright, like the eyes of some predator. They were driving too close. And 2, in sync. Hey guys, I muttered, nervously tapping my fingers on the steering wheel. Are you planning a race? This is bad weather. I picked up the speed, hoping they'd pass me. But they sped up too, and then a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't a coincidence. They were following me. My heart started beating faster. Calm down, Lisa, I told myself. You're not in a movie. Maybe it was just the guys from the factory leaving. I took the next turn, hoping to cut to a better lit street. They turned right after me, both cars, big, dark sedans. Unmarked. That's when I got really scared. What do they want from me? I'm a simple accountant. I have no enemies. I didn't steal from the Mafia. Although, my boss, he's been acting strange lately. He seemed kind of nervous. Yesterday, he handed me that very same folder, a thick one with the Kimco logo. Lisa, my dear, he said, sweating. Will you take her to the office on Pine Street? Just today. I really need it. I'll arrange a day off for you later. I thought he was trying to set me up, but he begged so sincerely. And I've always been too soft, and now it felt like 2 Jeeps with strangers were driving right over me. I stepped on the gas. My Honda roared as loud as it could. The windshield wipers swiped furiously, smearing dirty water across the glass. I flew through the dark, slippery streets, taking random turns, trying to lose them. They were on my tail. Closer, closer still. The 2 men flanking him were clearly security, broad-shouldered, alert, their hands folded in front of them in that universal stance of trained bodyguards. But it was the man in the center who commanded the space. He didn't walk into the gallery, he claimed it. The ambient sound seemed to dim, as if the room itself was Mr. Chen rushed forward, his anxiety now barely contained. He bowed, not a casual nod, but a full, formal bow that spoke of hierarchy and fear. Taking up 1.5 lanes. I had less than a second to decide. Brake? But those 2 would crash into me from behind. Swerve? I wouldn't have time. I pressed the brake pedal all the way to the floor. The tires squealed on the wet asphalt. The tall man, Mr. Kang, didn't acknowledge the greeting immediately. His dark eyes continued their sweep of the space, cataloging exits, assessing threats, noting details. When his gaze finally settled on Chen, it was with the weight of absolute authority. Show me. His voice was deep, measured, with a crisp Korean accent that turned each English word into something sharp and precise. It wasn't loud, but it carried, command wrapped in courtesy. Chen gestured toward the central painting. Of course, the piece you requested, authenticated as promised, feeling my heart trying to jump out of my chest. This is absolute, utter crap. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, unable to move. Then I slowly turned my head. The 2 cars that were chasing me sped past at breakneck speed and disappeared into the darkness. They didn't even stop. So, they weren't the ones I was looking for? Or, Chen continued his pitch, his words tumbling out in anxious English. But then Kang raised one hand, a simple gesture that cut through the nervous chatter like a blade. Korean, Kang said softly. I prefer directness. Physically ill. He gestured for me to get out of the car with an unyielding gesture. My legs wouldn't obey me. Chen's face went pale. He glanced desperately toward the silk screen where Zara stood hidden. I'm sorry, I didn't, I began, but my voice trembled betrayingly. He wasn't listening. Of course, Mr. Kang, my translator. He said something into the small headset on his wrist. Then he took a step back. Then translate. Kang's eyes hadn't moved from the painting, but his voice had dropped into something colder. Then a long black wool coat. And finally, him. He stepped out of the car slowly, with unflappable calm, as if he were stepping out onto the red carpet rather than into a pouring rain in the middle of the night. The rain trickled down his perfect coat, leaving no trace. Tell him the painting is genuine, Chen said in Korean, his voice pitched low. Tell him the hidden compartment behind the frame contains what he paid for. Tell him the documentation is complete. Dark, deep, like a starless night sky. They looked at me, and there was no anger or irritation in them. There was only an icy, all-consuming emptiness. Dangerously empty. He came so close that I could smell his perfume. Wood, leather, and something cold, like a weapon. He exuded such power and authority that I wanted to step back, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. He wasn't looking at the broken mirror of his car. He was looking at me, as if he were studying a rare, absurd insect. Are you blind? His voice was quiet, low, enveloping. He didn't shout, but every word struck a nerve. Or are you simply looking for a quick way out of this world? Everything inside me clenched. Fear paralyzed me. But somewhere deep down, under the layer of panic, my good old defense mechanism began to stir. Sarcasm. My fault, I miscalculated, I squeezed out, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. Your tank, sedan, took up a lane and a half. Driving lessons wouldn't hurt. The mountain of a man in a suit made a sharp movement toward me, but he simply raised his hand, barely noticeable. Just a centimeter, and the bodyguard froze in place as if on command. Absolutely. Instantly. It was terrifying. His gaze fell on me again. He slowly moved that icy gaze from my frightened face to my trembling hands. What do you have in the car? He asked in the same even, dispassionate tone. My brain started working at breakneck speed. The folder. My boss's damned folder. Do they know about it? Was this why they were chasing me? Emptiness, I lied, the first thing that came to mind. My voice sounded hoarse. Despair. Unpaid mortgage. He didn't smile. He didn't blink. His gaze was like an X-ray. He slid past me, out the window of my Honda, and stopped on the same brown folder lying on the passenger seat. On the thick corner with the Kimco logo. I saw something flicker in the depths of his eyes. Not surprise. More like recognition and cold clarity. He took a step forward, closing the distance to 0. I felt dizzy from his proximity and that piercing gaze. Get out of the car, he whispered so quietly that I almost read it on his lips. Calmly, come with me. He leaned a little closer, and his breath touched my ear. If you try to run away or scream... He paused for a moment, letting the words seep into my consciousness. Don't try. It wasn't a threat. It was a fact. A statement. My heart was pounding. Go with him? With this ghost? It was suicide. But if I refused, I looked at his bodyguard, at his empty eyes. There were no options. An invitation to a date? A last-ditch attempt to save face? Original. You could have bought some flowers. And then the incredible happened. The corner of his perfect mouth twitched. Just a millimeter, not a smile, not at all. More like a microscopic contraction of muscles. But I noticed it, and it was more terrifying than any smile. He turned and without another word walked to his limousine. A bodyguard opened the door for him. He disappeared inside without looking back. The mountain of a man opened another door for me and gestured for me to get in. The inside smelled of leather, expensive perfume, and money. Enormous, old money. I climbed inside, feeling dirty, wet, and a complete stranger in this realm of luxury. I sat down on the soft seat opposite him. He looked out the window, completely relaxed, as if I were part of the landscape. The car moved off, smoothly, almost silently. I looked at his profile, illuminated by the neon lights of the passing streets. Who is he? Why did my boss's folder arouse such interest in him? And where were they taking me? He turned his head and met my gaze. In the darkness of the cabin, his eyes seemed completely black. My name is Jin Ho, he said simply. Now tell me the truth, Lisa. Who are you, and why did those people try to kill you? My breath caught in my throat. From the question. And from the fact that he knew my name. I hadn't said it. And then I understood. It wasn't an accident. My accident with his car. It was the start of something. Something big, dark, and very, very dangerous. And now I was in the middle of it, deep in shit, with a Korean Mafia boss looking at me as if he saw all my secrets. And the biggest question spinning in my head as we drove into the unknown was, would I survive until morning? Great, I completely rewrote the second chapter, deepening the character's psychology, adding new scenes, and ratcheting up the tension. Here it is. The silence in the limo was deafening. After his words, "Why did those people try to kill you?" The world narrowed to the size of this car, to Jinho's chilling gaze, and to the frantic pounding of my heart somewhere in my throat. He knew my name. He saw those people. And he used the word kill with the same ease with which I say, "Go get coffee." I don't know who they are, I breathed, my voice hoarse and hesitant. They were just following me. He didn't look away. It was as if he was waiting for me to burst under the pressure of this silence. I clenched my rain-damp knees, trying to stop shaking. My coat was heavy and cold. "Folder," he finally said, breaking the silence. Not a question, a statement. "It's from my boss, Mr. Peterson. He asked me to take it to the office. I don't know what's inside, I swear." Jinho slowly leaned back in his seat, his fingers steepled in front of his face. "Mr. Peterson?" He said the name with a hint of mockery. A man who sells his boss's secrets rarely lives to retire. A horrific image formed in my mind. My cowardly, sweating boss, the folder with the Kimco logo, the pursuers. This icy man in front of me. I was a pawn, a bargaining chip in some dirty game. So, they wanted to take the file and get rid of me? I asked, swallowing hard. They wanted to take the file, and you were a witness. Useless evidence. The car came to a smooth stop. I didn't even notice how we pulled up. Outside the window, a skyscraper loomed, blind and faceless in the night. Not the pompous penthouse I'd imagined. It was a modern, austere building of glass and steel. Jinho walked out first, without looking back. His bodyguard, I'd nicknamed him Mountain, opened the door for me and gestured for me to follow them. We walked through a quiet, deserted hallway with a floor polished to a mirror shine. Our footsteps echoed loudly. The elevator whisked us to the top floor without a single button. Apparently, access was by fingerprint or something. When the door to his apartment opened, I froze in the doorway. This wasn't a house. It was a bunker disguised as a luxury residence. A huge open-plan space with floor-to-ceiling windows, beyond which the city glowed at night. Minimalism. Every shade of gray, black, and white. Not a single unnecessary detail, not a single knickknack. A shelf of books, but the books looked new, unread. Everything exuded a cold, soulless order, and silence. An oppressive silence. "Take off your wet clothes," Jinho said, taking off his coat and hanging it on a coat rack hidden behind the wall. He moved toward the bar, a long, illuminated marble counter. I awkwardly pulled off my soaking wet coat, leaving me in a wrinkled, damp blouse and jeans. I felt like a mud-spattered mongrel in a museum. He poured himself a glass of dark amber liquid without offering me any. He took a sip. He set the glass down. "You're staying here until I sort this situation out," he declared, finally turning to me. His tone was even, businesslike. "What? No!" The protest burst out of him. "I have a life, a job, an apartment. The cat." "The cat will be looked after," he replied, as if it were the most obvious and only solution. "The rest is not important." "It is not important to you." My voice trembled again with impotent rage. He approached me slowly, not to intimidate, more like a surgeon to a patient he is not interested in. "Your life," he paused, emphasizing, "is more important than your work right now. Understand?" In his eyes again, I saw not anger, but something else. Cold responsibility, a sense of duty. He had dragged me into this, and now I was his problem. A burdensome one, but his. I gave in. I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "Okay," he said, and to my surprise added, "If you're hungry, order whatever you want. We have everything here. He turned and walked deeper into the apartment, leaving me alone in the middle of this huge, soulless living room. I remained rooted to the spot, then slowly, on tiptoe, she began to explore the area. A kitchen island with smart appliances that seemed only AI could control. A bedroom with a huge bed made with perfectly smooth gray linens. The second bedroom, smaller, was just as sterile. No photographs, no books, no traces of anyone's life. It was a place where the body lived, but not the soul. I went to the window. The city lay below, like a cluster of glowing bacteria in a petri dish. I was so high, and so alone. Returning to the kitchen, I cautiously opened the giant refrigerator. It was filled with healthy food. Greens, vegetables, fish, some transparent containers with some incomprehensible dishes. Not a hint of chocolate, chips, or ice cream. Depression. I found an electronic tablet attached to the wall, a delivery menu. I scrolled through it, choosing something comforting, and ended up ordering pasta carbonara and a slice of chocolate cake. An act of desperation. While I was waiting for the food, I heard his voice from the study. He spoke Korean. Sharp, abrupt. Then the phone rang. In Korean again. I caught only one familiar word. Peterson. My boss's name was Jeffrey. Jeffrey Peterson. The food arrived incredibly quickly. A trusted mountain hand delivered it right to the door. I took the bag and, feeling uneasy, settled down to eat on a bar stool. Just then, Jinho emerged from his office. He paused when he saw me with a huge plate of pasta that smelled deliciously of bacon and cheese. He silently walked to the refrigerator, pulled out his container of steamed vegetables and a piece of salmon, heated it up in the smart oven, and sat down across from me. We ate in silence, he with his dietary Christmas, I with my rich, delicious pasta. Do you always eat so sadly? I couldn't stand the silence. A healthy body means a clear mind, he replied, not looking at me. Well, my mind is craving the comfort of carbs and sugar right now. I stabbed my plate with my fork. What are you having? Robot lunch? He looked up at me for a second, a shadow of something. Irritation? No, more like bewilderment. It's effective, he said and went back to his food. After dinner, he returned to his office, and I was left alone. I washed the dishes, his sink was cleaner than the operating room, and wandered to my room. A shower with 3 different nozzles did nothing to wash away the tension. I put on an oversized cotton robe I found in the closet and sat on the bed. It was already past midnight. I tried to make sense of this day. The stalking, the accident, this man, this golden cage. Unable to bear it any longer, I quietly left the room. The living room was dark. Only the light from under the door of his office drew a bright stripe on the floor. The door was slightly open. I was drawn to this light, like a moth. I peered inside. He was sitting at a massive wooden table, bent over something small he held in his hands. His back was towards me, and his posture? It was different. Shoulders slumped, head bowed. There was a weariness in it. Not physical, but some ancient spiritual weariness. He raised what he was holding to his lips. I took a closer look. It was an old, tattered black and white photograph. I couldn't see who was wearing it, but his fingers were squeezing it with a tenderness that didn't match his image. He whispered something in Korean. One word. It sounded like Oma, Mom. My heart sank. In that moment, he wasn't a mafia boss, just a boy who missed his mother. He sensed my presence. He turned around abruptly, and in the split second before he put on his usual mask, I saw raw, unprotected pain in his eyes. And shame. He quickly hid the photograph in a drawer. What do you want? His voice became an icy blade again. Nothing, I whispered, retreating. Just water. Don't come up behind me, ever. Understand? I nodded, feeling my cheeks burn. I retreated into the darkness of the living room, and he slammed the office door, cutting himself off from me. I stood in the darkness, leaning against the cold window pane, and realized it was much more complicated. This man wasn't just a monster, he was a wounded animal, and wounded animals bite the hardest. Back in my room, I tossed and turned for a long time. Suddenly, a new sound pierced the silence. Not a voice. Not a bell. A soft metallic click, right behind the wall, as if someone had just opened the door to the apartment. I froze, listening. Nothing. Only my frantically pounding heart. And then I heard the muffled sound of footsteps. Not his. His footsteps were silent, like a cat's. These were heavier, and there were several of them. They are already here. Fine. I accept your terms and will completely rework Chapter 3, deepening the characters, adding new scenes, and maintaining the required timing. They are already here. The words rang in my head with chilling clarity. I froze in the middle of the dark bedroom, holding my breath, trying to stop my knees from shaking. The footsteps in the living room were alien, heavy, uncertain, not like Jinho's silent tread. There were several of them, and they moved with a terrifying purpose. My heart was pounding so loudly, I thought I could hear it through the walls. Quiet, Lisa, quiet, I begged myself, pressing my palm to my chest. Adrenaline rushed to my head, clouding my thoughts. What should I do? Run? Where? Hide? Under the bed? They'll find me everywhere. And then I remembered his face, cold, collected. Don't make a sound. Whatever you hear, don't come out. It was an order, but right now it sounded like the most sensible thing I could do. Don't disturb him. Don't become his weak spot. I tiptoed to the door and, with trembling fingers, turned the key he'd given me after dinner. The lock clicked deafeningly loud in the silence of the night. I froze, listening. The footsteps outside stopped for a second. They heard. Then it all started. The first shot rang out. Dull, muffled, but no less eerie. It came from the depths of the apartment, from Jinho's office. Shouts were heard, in Korean, angry, full of rage. Then a return shot, and another. The glass shattered with a melodic, ominous ringing. I pressed my back against the cold wall by the door, closing my eyes. I wanted to scream, cry, curl up on the floor. But I stood and listened to this hell. I could hear furniture falling, someone groaning. Another shot, louder this time, as if in the hallway. Someone fell heavily to the floor, the impact shaking the wall. Lord, he is alone, against all of them. This thought pierced me more sharply than the fear for myself. Suddenly I caught myself praying not for my salvation, but for his. For this icy, unbearable, mysterious man to remain alive? Silence. It lasted for several seconds. It was even more terrible than the shots. Then new footsteps. Quick, confident, several pairs. They were approaching my door. It's them. They killed him. Now they've come for me. I recoiled from the door, looking around for a weapon. There was a heavy chrome lamp on the nightstand. I grabbed it, ripping it from its socket. My hands were shaking. It was a shame, but better than nothing. Someone pushed the door hard. The handle twitched, but the lock held. Open! A rough, accented voice croaked. I remained silent, clutching the lamp so tightly that my fingers turned white. I heard muffled conversation. Then another blow. This time not at the door, but next to it, at the wall. Something heavy and metallic. They were trying to knock out the lock or simply break down the wall. And suddenly, everything outside went silent. Silence again. Only the whistling in my ears and the smell of gunpowder coming through the crack under the door. What happened? Had they left? Was this a trap? I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. Slowly, millimeter by millimeter, I pressed my eye to the keyhole. The view was limited. I saw part of the corridor. And a body. One of the attackers was lying face down, a dark stain spreading across the light parquet beneath him. My heart sank, and then a shadow flickered into my field of vision. The movement was swift like a panther's. It was Jinho. His shirt was torn at the shoulder, and a wet, dark streak, blood, was visible on the dark fabric. He held a pistol in one hand and some long, crowbar-like object in the other. His face? It showed no pain or fear, only pure, unfiltered rage. A predator defending its territory. He said something in a quiet, calm voice. I couldn't make out the words, but the way he stood made it clear he was giving an order. To the survivors. Then he turned and looked straight at my door, straight through the keyhole. It seemed he could feel my gaze. His eyes glowed in the dim light, like a wolf's. He took a step toward the door. I recoiled, my heart pounding again. The lock clicked softly. The door opened. He stood there, filling the space. He smelled of smoke, sweat, and copper. He was wounded, breathing heavily, but his posture was still straight. Are you okay? His voice was hoarse, but surprisingly collected. I couldn't utter a word. just nodded, still clutching the stupid lamp. He noticed it. His gaze slid over her, and that same almost invisible muscle twitched again at the corner of his mouth. "A good weapon," he said without a hint of irony. He entered the room, slammed the door, and leaned his back against it, as if closing me off from the world. He ran his hand over his face, and for a moment the mask fell. I saw weariness. A deep, weary weariness. All of them?" I whispered. "No, one escaped, through the balcony, but he won't tell anything." You're hurt." "It's nothing." He looked at his shoulder as if noticing the blood for the first time. "A cut." "It's not a cut." The sarcasm born of stress spoke up in me again. "There's real blood flowing there. Let me see." I took a step towards him, but he pulled away. "Don't." "Sit still," I almost screamed, grabbing his good arm. "You're a tough mafioso, not a kid. Sit down right now." He looked at me with such genuine amazement that I almost found it funny. It seemed no one had spoken to him in that tone for the last 20 years. He slowly sank onto the edge of the bed. I found a first aid kit in the bathroom, a huge professional one with a ton of bandages, plasters, and even suture material. I returned, knelt in front of him, and began carefully peeling away the fabric of his shirt that was stuck to the wound. He hissed in pain. "Be patient," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "It's your own fault." The wound wasn't deep, but long. The bullet must have passed through glancingly. I washed it with antiseptic, feeling it tense under my fingers. Then I applied the bandage. My hands were shaking, but I tried to do everything carefully. As I tied the last knot, he raised his hand and covered mine. His palm was large, warm, and rough, full of scars. "Thank you," he whispered, and there was nothing icy in those words, only warmth and tiredness. I looked up at him. We were sitting so close. I saw every feature of his face, every wrinkle around his eyes, every bead of sweat on his temples. "You're welcome," I replied just as quietly. "Next time, just buy flowers, okay? Instead of such extreme dates?" And he smiled. A real, albeit tired, but real smile. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger and more human. "I need to check something," he said, his gaze becoming serious again. He stood up and walked to the window, pulling back the edge of the curtain. They knew where to look, so they had information. From the one who escaped? No, from someone else. He turned to me. "Your boss. Peterson, he's alive, under protection." "What?" I didn't understand. "Those people who attacked us, they're not from my clan. They're mercenaries. They were hired to take the file and eliminate all the witnesses, including you, and including Peterson." My head flipped. "So they wanted to kill him too?" "Exactly. Someone wants to cover their tracks, and that someone..." He paused. "Very close." He walked over to the dresser and pulled out a small, elegant pistol. He checked the clip and handed it to me. "What is this?" I looked at the gun like a rabbit at a boa constrictor. "Take care of it, just in case." I don't know how... "Just point it and pull the trigger. It will do the rest." He pressed the cold metal into my trembling hand. "You're not just a witness now, Lisa. You're a target, and I won't let them take you." I looked at the gun, then at him, at his bandaged shoulder, at the blood on his hands. This man had just killed people to protect me. Someone else. An annoying accident. "Why?" I blurted out. "Why are you doing all this? For me?" He looked at me, and a shadow of the pain I had seen in the office flashed in his eyes again. "Because I once failed to protect someone," he said quietly. "And I won't make that mistake again." And turning, he walked out of the room, leaving me alone with a gun in my hand and a million new questions in my head. Who was the one he didn't save? And what will happen when those behind all of this realize the first attack failed? Fine, I accept your terms and am completely reworking Chapter 4, deepening the characters, adding new scenes, and maintaining the required running time. The gun in my hand felt incredibly heavy, a cold alien object disrupting the familiar weight of the world. I sat on the bed, clutching it, unable to tear my eyes away from the locked door. Jinho's words echoed in the silence. Because I once couldn't protect someone. Who was it? His mother? His lover? a friend. This crumb of his past, abandoned in despair, suddenly made him feel real. Not a monster, not a mafia boss, but a man with his own unhealed wound. And for some reason, this wound was now connected to me. Muffled sounds drifted from outside. Footsteps, quiet voices, the scraping of something heavy on the floor. His men were cleaning up the aftermath of the night's visit. I imagined bloodstains on the perfect parquet floor, and I felt slightly nauseous. Dawn peeked through the window, painting the sky a dirty pink. I didn't close my eyes. Every rustle made me flinch and clutch the handle of my pistol. When there was a knock on the door, I jumped. "Liza?" That was his voice. Tense but calm, I slowly approached the door, still holding the gun. "Yes?" "Open up, all clear." I turned the key. He stood at the threshold, already changed into a fresh dark turtleneck. His hair was damp as if he had just stepped out of the shower, washing away the traces of the night. He smelled clean and lightly soapy. No blood, no gunpowder. Only the shadow of fatigue under my eyes betrayed the experience. "You didn't sleep," he stated, looking at my eyes, probably wide from lack of sleep. "Amazing, huh?" After such an invigorating evening, I tried to joke, but my voice broke. He came in and sat on the bed next to me, carefully studying the gun in my hands. "Give it here." He gently took it from me, checked the safety, and put it on the nightstand. "You shouldn't fall asleep with it." "What do you need?" I asked, and my voice sounded genuine, childish confusion. "What do you need to do, Jinho? I can't sit here forever, jumping at every rustle." "You need to learn not to jump," he answered simply. "But to act." He stood up and gestured for me to follow him. We went out into the living room. There were no signs of a struggle at all. Everything was clean, as if nothing had happened. Only a slight chemical smell of air freshener hung in the room. "We're leaving," he announced, approaching one of the wardrobes. He pressed a hidden button, and a section of the wall slid aside with a soft click, revealing a hidden elevator. My jaw dropped. "Seriously? A hidden elevator? Are you like James Bond?" "James Bond would be dead by now in my world," he retorted, stepping inside. The elevator was tiny, designed for 2 or 3 people. When the doors closed, I was centimeters away from him. I felt the warmth of his body, heard his even breathing. The elevator moved smoothly downwards. We were silent. The tension between us was now of a different nature. Not hostile, not based on fear. It was personal. The elevator opened directly into an underground garage. Not a limousine awaited us, but a nondescript gray SUV. Jinho opened the door for me, his fingers briefly brushing my hand as I climbed inside. A simple touch, but it sent shivers down my spine. We drove out of the garage onto the still deserted morning streets. He drove with absolute concentration, his eyes constantly glancing at the mirrors. "Where are we going?" I asked, looking out at the waking city. "To a safe place, away from the center." Half an hour later, we pulled up to a nondescript townhouse in a quiet, leafy neighborhood. It looked like an ordinary family home, with a planter by the door and a child's bike in the neighboring entrance. Inside it was cozy, not designer sterile, but genuine. Books on the shelves, a blanket on the sofa, the smell of coffee and old wood. "Whose house is this?" I asked, stepping with pleasure on the soft carpet. "Mine," he answered shortly, locking the door with several massive locks. "Nobody knows about it." He led me around the house, showing me the rooms. There was even a small but well-equipped kitchen. He went to the coffee machine and, to my surprise, made 2 cappuccinos with expert milk foam. "You know how to make coffee," I remarked, accepting the cup from him. "There are many things I know how to do." He sipped his coffee and looked at me over the rim of the cup. "And some of them, I can teach you." After coffee, he led me down to the basement. I expected to find a pantry full of jam jars, but it was a spacious, well-ventilated shooting range. A long shooting gallery with several targets at the end. "First lesson," he said, producing a small but serious pistol. "The one I gave you is for emergencies. This is for practice." He stood behind me, his chest almost touching my back. He took my hands in his, adjusting my grip. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent. "Don't tense your wrists." His voice was right next to my ear, low and insistent. "Aim. Breathe evenly. As you exhale, gently squeeze the trigger." His proximity was more disorienting than the shot itself. I felt the warmth of his body, heard his even breathing. I smelled him. Cleanliness, coffee, and a hint of his perfume. I fired. Missed. The recoil was unexpectedly strong, reverberating in my shoulder. Terrible, he stated bluntly. Thanks for the support, Sensei, I snorted. The truth is the best support. Try again. And this time, he placed his hands on mine again. Let me help. We spent over an hour like that. Shooting, he corrected. I scolded. He endured. And by the end, I wasn't missing the milk anymore, but at least I was hitting the target, right on the edge. After practice, we went up to the kitchen. I sat down on a chair, smelling of gunpowder, feeling my hands shaking from the strain. Not so bad, he said, placing a glass of water in front of me. For a full teapot? I chuckled. For starters, he corrected. Then his gaze turned serious. You asked why I'm doing this. I froze, waiting. It was my little sister, he began quietly, looking somewhere past me. Her name was Sohee. She was, like you, bright, stubborn, always said what she thought. He paused and I saw his fist clench. She wasn't in the game. She was just near me at the wrong time. My father's enemies. They wanted to strike, and they chose her, to hurt me. He fell silent, and the silence in the small kitchen became thick and heavy. I'm late. His voice was lifeless. Only by a few minutes, but that was enough. Jinho, I didn't know what to say. I'm so sorry. Pity is useless. He stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back. But I've learned my lesson. If you take responsibility, don't let go, or don't take it at all. The same pain I saw last night was in his eyes, but now I knew its name. Sohee. Suddenly, his phone lying on the table vibrated. He looked at the screen and his face turned stony. He read the message and slowly looked up at me. Peterson is dead, he said in an even tone. Found in his safe house. Made it look like a suicide. An ice lump formed in my stomach. My boss was murdered. The man I had coffee with yesterday morning. So, I'm the last lead? I whispered. Not the last, he corrected. His gaze was sharp as a blade. There's another person who knows about the folder and that you were carrying it. The one who hired these people. Who? The one who ordered Peterson to give you this assignment. The one who needed this folder. The one who is at the very center of my clan. He walked to the window, pulled back the edge of the curtain, and looked out onto the deserted street. The traitor, it's one of mine. Jinho's words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous like lead fumes. The traitor. It's one of mine. He stood by the window, his silhouette tense to the limit. It seemed he was trying to pierce the walls of the house, the street, the city with his gaze, to see the face of the one who had stabbed him in the back. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and the glass of water in front of me suddenly seemed like my only point of support in a crumbling world. Who? Was the only word I could squeeze out. He turned slowly. His face was pale, and his eyes burned with a cold fire. I don't know, but he knows about you, and he knows that I hid you. That means he is close, very close. He walked around the kitchen, his steps silent, but with every movement there was such a rush of rage that the air seemed to crackle. He used Peterson as bait. He knew I would start my investigation with him, and he knew you would be nearby. This is not the attack of a frightened man. This is a move. A move in what game? I asked, feeling fear give way to a strange, cold curiosity. My analytical mind, so long used to crunching numbers, now desperately tried to calculate probabilities and motives. A game for my place, he answered simply, and your life is one of the pieces on the board. He stopped in front of me, bracing his hands on the tabletop. We can't stay here long. Sooner or later, he will figure out this place. But we can't go in blind. What should we do? My voice was quieter than I intended. We will make him make a mistake, Jinho said, and a familiar dangerous spark flashed in his eyes. He thinks you are my weakness, that I will rush around trying to protect you, so we'll show him that you're not weak. He straightened up and walked into the living room, leaving me to digest his words, to show that I am not weak. What does this mean? That I will become bait? Or something more? The next few days passed in a strange, tense rhythm. Jinho hardly slept. He was constantly in contact with someone, his quiet, broken conversations in Korean coming from his room. He checked every scrap of information, every person who had access to him. I could see how it was draining him. Suspicion, like acid, ate away at him from the inside. In between his investigations, he taught me. It was not like that sterile shooting range. It was like training. He showed me how to move stealthily around the house using blind spots, how to determine how many people are in the next room by sound, how to use the most ordinary objects as weapons. A pen, a heavy book, a belt. One evening, as we sat in the living room with the lights out, he suddenly said, "Tell me about Peterson, about his habits, about what he said that day." I closed my eyes, trying to recall every detail. He was nervous, a lot. His forehead was wet, even though the office was cool. He kept fiddling with his pen, and he said something strange. Jinho was wary. "What?" He said, "Give this to the person with the dragon ring." But when I asked what that meant, he became embarrassed and said, "Never mind, just give it to whoever will be in the office." "The dragon ring," Jinho repeated quietly. His face remained impassive, but I saw his pupils constrict. It meant something to him. "What is it?" I asked. "Nothing," he answered too quickly and got up. "Go to bed. Tomorrow will be a hard day." But I couldn't sleep. I saw his reaction. He knew about the ring. And he lied to me. For the first time in a long time, he lied outright. This revelation struck me more than the gunshots that night. The trust that had been slowly built between us, bit by bit, cracked. Why? What was so terrible about this ring? The next morning, the atmosphere in the house thickened even more. Jinho was gloomy. He barely spoke, only issuing short instructions. Stay away from the window. Eat. Rest. After lunch, he emerged from his room with 2 small backpacks. "We're leaving. Now. Where?" "Somewhere he won't look. Won't." Into the thick of it. We got back in the car. This time, Jinho drove not along quiet streets, but along busy central avenues. He constantly changed lanes, made unexpected turns, entered and exited multi-story parking lots. He checked for tailgating. Finally, we stopped at a nondescript office building in the business district. We took the elevator to one of the middle floors. He swiped the key card in the lock, and we entered. An empty, dusty office. The shelves were bare, scraps of paper littered the floor. "What is this?" I asked, looking around. "The former office of one of our fictitious companies. It was disbanded 6 months ago. No one will remember him." He led me into a small, windowless room that apparently was the executive's office. There was a shabby sofa, a table, and a couple of chairs. "Wait here," he ordered. "I'll be back in an hour. Don't open the door to anyone. Under any circumstances." "Where are you going?" "I need to check something. On site." He turned to leave, but I grabbed his sleeve. "Jinho, wait." He turned, his gaze distant, encased in ice. "The dragon ring," I reminded him. "You know what it is, and you know who wears it. Don't leave without telling me. I have a right to know what I'm up against." He looked at me, and I saw the internal struggle. Duty and suspicion on one side. And something else. Budding trust on the other. "The one who wears this ring," he struggled to speak, "is the man I trusted with my life. My right-hand man, my advisor, the man I considered brother." The name hung in the air between us, unspoken, but already poisoning everything around. "And you're going to him? Alone?" I was horrified. "I have to look him in the eyes," he answered with icy calm. "And I have to be sure that you are safe while I'm gone." He pulled a small, flat pistol from his pocket and put it in my hand. "This time, try not to miss, if anything." And he was gone. The sound of the locking door sounded like a death sentence for me. I was left alone in a dusty, dark room. Clutching the gun in my hand, I listened to every rustle in the empty office. The creaking of the old building seemed ominous. Footsteps in the corridor, or maybe it seemed to me, made my heart stop. I thought about him. About the fact that he was now going to meet the man he once called brother, with a traitor, walking alone. Because he no longer knows who to trust? And I thought about the dragon ring, about how this man, this brother, knew about Dad, knew about Peterson, and he gave the order to kill me. A simple accountant who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence. Not from outside. From my pocket. A quiet, insistent beep. The phone Jinho had given me for emergency contact. A single word lit up the screen. Taeyong. Taeyong, his loyal bodyguard. The very same mountain. But if the traitor was his closest advisor, could Taeyong be in cahoots? Or was this a trap? I stared at the vibrating phone, my finger hovering hesitantly over the answer button. To accept the call would possibly mean giving away our location. To reject it would possibly mean ignoring Jinho's cry for help. A loud, sharp knock on the office door made me flinch and drop the phone from my hands. I froze, holding my breath. The knock came again, more insistent, demanding. "Lisa!" A muffled, familiar voice came from behind the door. It was Taeyong. "Open up! He's hurt! He needs help!" My heart sank into a pit. He's hurt. Without a thought, without a plan, obeying only this chilling fear for him, I rushed to the door and turned the lock. "He's hurt. He needs help." Taeyong's words rang out like a gunshot in the silence of the empty office. Hurted. The word echoed within me like a panicked echo. Without a single thought, obeying only a blind animal impulse, I yanked the door open. Taeyong stood on the threshold, breathing heavily. His usually impassive face was distorted by a grimace of tension. He held a gun in his hand, and it was pointed not towards the hallway but directly at me. Time slowed. I saw the smallest details. Drops of rain on his black coat, mud on his boots, the cold steel in his gaze in which there was not a drop of his former devotion. "Where is he?" I whispered, taking a step back, but it was too late. Taeyong pushed the door open hard and stepped inside, causing me to recoil. The door slammed shut with a deafening thud, cutting off any escape route. "Not where you think." His voice was rough and emotionless. He scanned the room with one quick, professional glance. "Where's the phone? The key card?" My brain, paralyzed by fear, raced. Traitor. He was a traitor, and he had used my weakness. Used my feelings for Jinho against me. You are his right-hand man," I breathed out, still unable to believe it. "He trusted you." "Trust is a luxury we cannot afford," he snapped, taking a step toward me. His massive frame filled the small room. "The phone, the key card, this is the last time I'll ask politely." I clutched the gun Jinho had given me in my pocket. My palms were sweating. "Shoot!" My inner voice screamed. "Just point and pull the trigger." But I froze. I've never shot at a person. At a target, yes. At living, breathing flesh? Taeyong, seeing my confusion, chuckled. Briefly, silently. "Don't waste time. He's not here. No one will come." "Why?" I asked, trying to push back the inevitable. "Why are you doing this?" "Because it's time for a change." He took another step. Now there were no more than 2 meters between us. "Jinho is weak. He's distracted by sentimentality, like you. Our world is not for sentimentality." "He considered you a brother?" My voice broke into a scream. "And a brother shouldn't have allowed his sister to be killed." Taeyong suddenly roared, and for a second, real, wild rage flared in his eyes. "He should have taken revenge, destroy them all, and he made a truce. Despicable coward." There it was, the root of betrayal, not the lust for power. Revenge. Revenge for Jinho's sister, for So-hee. Revenge for the fact that Jinho chose strategy over slaughter. This flash of rage cost him a precious second. And that second was enough for me. I abruptly dashed not toward the door, but to the side, behind the massive table. At that very moment, Taeyong fired. A dull bang sounded right next to my ear. A bullet slammed into the wall, showering me with plaster fragments. Adrenaline rushed to my head, washing away the fear. Now there was only one goal: to survive. I knocked the table over onto him. He didn't fall, but he staggered back, and that was enough. I dashed out of the room into the dark hallway of the empty office. "Stupid girl!" His voice thundered behind me. I ran without looking where I was going, diving into side corridors, tripping over abandoned boxes. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would jump out. I could hear his heavy, quick footsteps behind me. He was the hunter. and I was the prey. I flew into a large open space filled with empty cubes. The light from the street dimly illuminated the space, creating long, distorted shadows. I crouched at one of the desks, trying to muffle my breathing. The footsteps came closer. He entered the hall. His shadow slowly glided along the walls. "Come out, Lisa." His voice was calm, almost gentle. "You're only prolonging the torment." "I'll do it quickly." I clutched the pistol. "Breathe. Aim. As you exhale." Jinho's voice came to mind. I peeked out from behind cover. He stood with his back to me 20 meters away. A perfect target. I raised the gun. My hands were shaking. I tried to aim, but the front sight was jumping before my eyes. He sensed my movement. He turned around abruptly. His pistol was already aimed at me. Our gazes met through the dimness of the hall. In his, the cold confidence of an executioner. In mine, the despair of a hunted animal. Time stood still, and then behind him, from the dark opening of another corridor, a shadow appeared silently. Jinho. He moved like a ghost, not a sound. His face was a pale canvas of rage. The blade of a large combat knife flashed in his hand. Taeyong, sensing danger, began to turn. But it was too late. Jinho was as swift as a cobra. He didn't shoot. With one sharp movement, he pressed the blade of the knife to Taeyong's throat, and with his other hand, he knocked the gun out of his hand. "Don't move." Jinho's voice was a soft whisper, but it sounded louder than any scream. "Move and I'll slit your throat." I stood there, unable to move, still aiming my gun at nothing. "Drop the gun, Lisa," Jinho said, his eyes never leaving Taeyong. "It's over." The gun fell from my weakened fingers with a dull thud. "Big brother," Taeyong croaked. "I knew you'd come for her." "You were only wrong about one thing," Jinho said icily. "She's not my weakness." He twisted Taeyong's arm behind his back with a forceful movement and pinned his face to the wall. "Who's behind this? Who gave you the order?" Taeyong laughed hoarsely. "You think I'm alone? You're blind, Jinho. The rebellion has already begun. They'll come for you and your new toy." Jinho pressed the blade harder, and a thin drop of blood appeared on Taeyong's neck. "Name." "Go to hell." Suddenly, Taeyong made a desperate lunge. He slammed his head back into Jinho's face. Jinho recoiled, loosening his grip for a split second. That was enough. Taeyong, using his incredible strength, lunged for his gun, lying on the floor. I didn't think, I acted. I lunged forward and kicked the gun. It flew into the darkness, skidding across the floor. Taeyong turned on me with a roar of rage. His eyes were filled with hatred, but he didn't have time to take a step. A shot rang out. Quiet, precise. Taeyong froze, his eyes widening in surprise. A small scarlet spot appeared on his chest. He slowly sank to his knees and then collapsed heavily to the floor. I stood there, unable to tear my eyes away from his body. Then I looked up. Jinho stood there with a smoking gun in his hand. His face was stony. But when he looked at me, I saw in his eyes not the pain of betrayal, not rage, but something else. Respect. You killed him," I whispered. "He made his choice years ago," Jinho replied quietly. He approached me, his steps slow and heavy. He stopped very close. "And you stayed. You fought." He raised his hand and slowly, as if afraid to startle me, touched the back of his fingers to my cheek. His touch was rough, but surprisingly gentle. "I told him the truth," he whispered, looking into my eyes. "You are not my weakness, Lisa." He didn't say what I was. He shouldn't have. His gaze said everything, but this moment of closeness was short-lived. His gaze became sharp, focused again. He bent down and picked up my pistol from the floor, putting it back in my hand. "He said the rebellion has already begun," I said, feeling the cold handle, "that they will come for us." Jinho nodded. His face lit up with the cold fire of the coming battle. "Then we will not wait for them." He took my hand. His palm was firm and confident. "We will go to them ourselves." His words, "We'll go to them ourselves," hung in the air not as a challenge, but as a cold, undeniable fact. Taeyong's death lay between us like a heavy, bloody stone, but there was no time for grief or doubt. Jinho was different. The softness, the rare vulnerability I'd seen in his eyes, was gone. He was a weapon now, vengeance incarnate. We didn't go to the exit. Instead, he led me back to the same secret elevator in the penthouse that led to the garage. But this time, he pressed the wrong button. The elevator, with a dull hum, descended much deeper than the parking level. "Where are we going?" I asked, my ears popping from the pressure difference. "A place not on the plans," he answered, not looking at me. His gaze was fixed on the floor indicator. "My last refuge. If they knew about the townhouse, they know everything. Except this." The doors opened onto a small concrete bunker. The air was cool and smelled of dust and metal. This was not the luxury of his penthouse. Only the essentials. Racks of weapons, ammunition, first aid kits, a generator, a desk with computers, and 2 simple cots in the corner. He threw his backpack on the desk and immediately sprang into action. His movements were sharp, efficient. He pulled out several dirty phones, several stacks of cash in various currencies, and passports. "Listen carefully." His voice was like steel. Taeyong was right. The rebellion is around the corner, it's here, and they have outside support. The Kaido clan from Yokohama. They've wanted our port routes for a long time. He turned on one of the laptops and the screen came to life, showing a city map with blinking markers. They'll strike 3 key points: the main office, port warehouse number 5, and here. He pointed at the marker that marked his penthouse. Simultaneously, to scatter my forces and carry out a decapitation strike. "A decapitation strike?" I repeated, and my stomach went cold. "They'll come for me, personally, and for you as a witness. So what are we going to do? Sit here?" I looked around the cramped bunker. It felt like a trap. "No," he shook his head, that merciless, predatory smile appearing on his lips. "We'll give them what they want. But on our terms." He turned the laptop towards me. On the screen was a diagram of the penthouse. "They'll go there. They know that after Taeyong fails, I'll hide there in the most fortified point. It makes sense. We'll let them inside." "We?" I caught my breath. "You and me." The plan he'd laid out was insane. Suicidal. We were to return to the penthouse, which was about to become a battlefield. I was to be the bait, the helpless hostage he was pretending to hide. And he would hunt them within the walls of his own home. "I can't do it, Jinho," I said honestly, feeling my legs buckle. "I'm not a soldier. I'm an accountant." He walked up to me and took my chin in his hand, forcing me to look him in the eyes. "You're not an accountant. You're Lisa." The same woman who didn't lose her composure when an armed killer was advancing on her. The one who didn't run, but rushed to knock the gun out of his hands. Forget who you were. Remember who you've become in these few days. His words stung. There was no flattery in them, just a statement of fact. And in that moment, I realized he believed in me more than I believed in myself. We spent several hours in the bunker. He showed me the layout of the penthouse, all the secret passages, the ventilation hatches, the camera blind spots. He handed me a miniature headset and showed me how to use it. "You will be my eyes in certain places," he said. "If you see something, speak up, always. I will listen." Then he took out 2 small flat devices, similar to e-cigarettes. "Smoke bombs," he explained. "Short-acting. You throw them, they create a thick curtain for 15 seconds. Enough to hide or regroup." He made me repeat the plan over and over until I could see it with my eyes closed. Until the escape routes were burned into my mind. Finally, he looked at his watch. It was well past midnight. "It's time." We re-entered the elevator and ascended to the penthouse. It felt strange to return to this luxurious, silent tomb. Every piece of furniture, every glimmer of light on the glass, now seemed like a potential hiding place or a deadly trap. Jinho moved silently, checking sensors, placing small, almost invisible surprises for intruders at the approaches to certain doors. He was like a spider spinning its web, waiting for prey. He pointed to one of the closets in the dressing room. It had a secret compartment large enough for a person to stand in. "Your main hiding place. If all goes wrong, hide in there. Don't come out until I come for you myself." Then he led me to a large vase of artificial greenery in the living room. "Here, under the decor," he held up a plastic plant, "is a spare pistol for emergencies." He had thought about everything, every little detail, and in this frightening preparation, there was a calming routine. When everything was ready, he came to me. We stood in the center of the living room, in the darkness, lit only by the city lights. "Are you scared?" he asked quietly. "Until death," I answered just as quietly. "Okay, fear keeps you on your toes. Just don't let it paralyze you." He placed his hand on my shoulder, heavy, warm. "I'll be there, always. I won't let you down." And this time it sounded not like a promise, but like an oath. The oath of a man who had already broken his word once and was now ready to do anything to atone. We took up positions. I was in my bedroom, by the door, holding a gun. He dissolved into the shadows of the penthouse, becoming a part of it. The silence was the most terrible. It lasted an eternity. Every creaking of the building, every hum of the elevator in the neighboring shaft made my heart pound. And then, an hour, maybe 2, later, I heard the first sound. Not from the entrance, from above, from the roof. A quiet metallic scraping. "Jin-ho," I whispered into the headset. "The roof." "I hear you," his quiet, even voice immediately followed in my ear. "They're here. Get ready." I pressed myself against the wall by the door, trying to breathe more quietly. Muffled footsteps were heard outside. Several couples. They moved quickly, professionally. Suddenly, the lights in the penthouse went out. The emergency power turned on a dim backlight along the baseboards, casting long, dancing shadows. I heard the first shot, muffled, suppressed, then a scream. Not Jin-ho. Alien. It began. The shots became more frequent. I could hear screams in Japanese and Korean. Jin-ho was right. This was an alliance of traitors and aliens. I sat, pressed against the wall, and listened to this hell. It was very close. I heard bodies fall, furniture break. Suddenly, the door to my bedroom swung open with a slam. A stranger in black tactical gear stood there, holding a machine gun. His gaze fell on me. I didn't think. I fired. The first shot hit the frame. The second? In his shoulder. He screamed and staggered back, but didn't fall. He raised the machine gun. And then, out of the darkness of the corridor, Jin-ho appeared like a ghost. In one motion, he grabbed the barrel of the machine gun, pointed it at the ceiling, and drove the blade of his knife into the attacker's neck. It all took less than 3 seconds. He looked at me. "Okay, move, plan B, through the closet." I nodded, still unable to utter a word, and broke into a run. But as soon as I reached the hallway, a burst of machine gun fire rang out from the other side. Bullets pierced the wall above my head. Jin-ho pushed me sharply back into the bedroom and jumped in the opposite direction into the living room. "Lisa," his voice was sharp in the headset. "Cut off. Leave through the secret passage in the closet. Now." "And you," I shouted back, but the connection was gone. The headset beeped shrilly and went silent. A jammer. I was alone, cut off from him, and between us there was at least one man with a machine gun. The plan was ruined, and now I had to decide for myself. Cut off. The word rang in my ears like a death knell. The connection was dead. I was alone. Somewhere out there, in the darkness between us, was a man with a machine gun. And somewhere beyond that was Jin-ho, perhaps already wounded, perhaps fighting to the death. Plan B. The dressing room. The secret passage. My legs felt weak and my throat tightened. "Remember who you've become." His voice echoed in my memory. I was no longer Lisa the accountant. I was... what? A woman with a gun in her trembling hand, cornered. The scraping of footsteps on broken glass in the hallway made me flinch. They were getting closer, slowly, methodically, combing the rooms. I crawled away from the door, trying not to make a sound. My heart was pounding so loudly that it seemed to be audible throughout the entire floor. The dressing room. I needed to get to the dressing room. I crawled across the bedroom, hugging the walls. My hand found the doorframe of the dressing room. It was pitch dark inside. I crawled inside and, using memory as a guide, crawled to the far closet, the one with the secret compartment. And then I heard a voice, right outside the bedroom door. Low, commanding, with a slight Korean accent, but unfamiliar. "Jin-ho, big brother," someone shouted. "Don't hide. Let's finish this with dignity. Come out and I'll spare your girlfriend's life. I might even make her my trophy." Laughter. Rough, full of contempt. I froze, pressed against the closet door. That voice. It was as cold as Jin-ho's, but there was naked cruelty in it. The same man with the dragon ring. The brain of betrayal. And then, from across the living room, Jinho's voice rang out. Calm, icy, without a single note of fear. Minjun, I knew it was you. Your vanity has always been your weakness. I couldn't resist coming personally to take my crown. It's already in my hands, brother, Minjun retorted. Your people are either dead or have betrayed you. Only you remain. And your African-American plaything? I slowly, millimeter by millimeter, opened the closet door and squeezed into the narrow hidden space. It smelled of dust and wood. It was cramped and stuffy, but it was a shelter. Through a crack in the structure, I could see part of the bedroom. And then I saw him. A tall man in a perfectly tailored dark suit stood in the doorway, his back to me. His pose was relaxed, triumphant. And on his left hand, clutching his machine gun, I saw a massive silver ring with a dragon's head. Where is she, Jinho? Minjun continued. Give her to me, and I will give you a quick death. For honor. You speak of honor? Jinho's voice was full of contempt. By betraying your blood? You are not worthy even of our clan's name. I sat in my hiding place, and fear slowly began to give way to something else. Anger. This man, Minjun, didn't just want to kill Jinho, he wanted to humiliate him. Take everything. And I was a part of this everything. A thing. A trophy. Jinho's plan was simple. I hide, he lures them in and eliminates them one by one. But now everything had gone awry. Minjun was here and he wasn't alone. And Jinho was somewhere out there, cut off. I couldn't just sit and wait. I couldn't be weak. Not now. I remembered the spare pistol in the vase in the living room. But to get to him, I had to go through the bedroom while Minjun was standing in the doorway. Madness. And then I remembered the smoke bombs. I had one in my pocket. Plan B? It didn't exist. But now I had to improvise. I slowly, trying not to creak, pulled the bomb out of my pocket. My fingers were shaking. 15 seconds. I whispered to myself. I calculated the distance. If I threw the bomb into the far corner of the bedroom, the smoke would create a curtain between me and Minjun. Maybe that would be enough to slip into the living room. It was a crazy risk. He could just start shooting randomly through the smoke. But there was nothing to be done. Waiting was death. I took a deep breath, pressed my eye to the crack to make sure Minjun's back was still turned, engrossed in his argument with Jinho. And then I threw the bomb. She landed on the carpet with a dull thud and hissed, releasing a thick cloud of white-gray smoke. The smoke quickly filled the room. What? I heard Minjun exclaim. I didn't wait. I burst from my hiding place, crouching low, and ran for the living room door, straight through the smoke. My eyes were watering. My throat was raw. Get her, Minjun shouted. I rushed into the living room. The lighting was dim. Everything was smoke and shadows. I saw a vase, rushed towards it, knocked it over, and felt the cold metal of a pistol. And at that moment, someone strong grabbed me from behind, clasping me around the neck. One of Minjun's men. I screamed and slammed my elbow into his ribs with all my might. He grunted, but his grip didn't loosen. His other hand reached out to knock the pistol out of my hand. And then, out of the smoke, like a ghost, Jinho appeared. His face was bloodied, his clothes torn. But his movements were quick and precise. He didn't shoot. He simply stepped up close and delivered a short, crushing blow with the heel of his palm to my captor's temple. He groaned and limply let go of me, collapsing to the floor. Jinho grabbed my hand. His palm was sticky with blood. I told you to hide. His voice was hoarse with rage and tension. Change of plan, I shouted back, clinging to his arm like a drowning man. We dove for cover, behind a massive bar table. Bullets whistled over our heads, shattering bottles of expensive alcohol. These guys were going to have one hell of a hangover. We sat with our backs pressed against the marble countertop. Jinho was breathing heavily. There are 3 of them, Minjun and his 2 goons, he whispered quickly. Communication is dead. There's no help. What are we going to do? I asked, clutching 2 pistols, mine and a spare. They think they've cornered us. He looked at me, and that dangerous fire flared in his eyes again. Then it's time to show them how wrong they are. He pulled his last smoke bomb from his belt. I'll create a smoke screen. You run to the elevator. Go down to the bunker. It's safe there. No, I grabbed his sleeve. I won't leave you. Lisa, that's an order. You said I'm not your weakness. Then don't make me act weak, I blurted out, and my voice didn't sound like childish resentment, but steely determination. He looked at me, and the war raged in his eyes. Fear for me, pride, and something else, warm and out of place in the midst of this hell. Suddenly, the shooting stopped. Jin-ho! Min-jun's voice rang out again. Enough! Come out, or we'll throw grenades into your cozy corner. We have plenty of them. Jin-ho squeezed my hand. Okay, he said quietly, but do everything as I say. He rose to his feet, not to give up. His posture was one of readiness to spring. Run to the corridor that leads to the office. Follow me. Don't look back. Shoot anyone who gets in your way. He pulled the pin and threw a smoke bomb in the direction of Min-jun's voice. Now, he commanded. We rushed out from behind cover. Smoke filled the living room. I ran, barely seeing the road, simply following his dark silhouette. Shots and screams rang out behind me. Jin-ho, running behind me, covered our retreat, firing back. I burst into the corridor. The door to the office was ahead. Almost there. And suddenly, one of the thugs jumped out of one of the side rooms. He was huge. He aimed his machine gun at me. I fired first, instinctively, twice. Both times I hit him in the chest. He recoiled, gasping for air in surprise, and collapsed. I stopped, breathing heavily, unable to take my eyes off the body. I killed a man. A strong hand grabbed me and dragged me on. Jin-ho. Don't look. Run. We burst into the office. He slammed the door and barricaded it with a heavy bookcase. It won't be long, he said, leaning against the wall and sliding to the floor. He was as pale as a sheet. I saw that his side was soaked with blood. A new wound. Or the old one, aggravated. Jin-ho! It's nothing. He tried to smile, but it came out pitiful. You were magnificent. Knocks were heard on the door from outside. Min-jun and his last fighter were trying to break it down. I knelt before him, trying to figure out where he was wounded. No, not now, he said, pushing my hand away. He looked at the secret door in his office, the same one I had once caught him behind with the photo. The hatch leads to the ventilation, to the roof. Our last chance. He was too weak to walk on his own. I could tell by his eyes. The blows on the door grew louder. The wood creaked. Listen to me, he whispered, squeezing my hand. His fingers were cold. Get to the roof. Give the signal. Taeyong was not entirely right. I have one trusted man on the neighboring roof. A sniper. He didn't finish. His eyes closed and his head fell limply onto his shoulder. Jin-ho? Jin-ho! I shook his shoulders, but he didn't react. At that moment, the door burst open with a bang. Min-jun stood on the threshold, machine gun in hand. A triumphant smile distorted his face. Oh ho, he whistled. What a touching picture. The fallen king and his loyal pariah. I rose to my feet, shielding Jin-ho's body with my body. My gun pointed at Min-jun. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but my hands didn't shake. Stay away, I said, my voice quiet but clear. He laughed, and he took a step forward. I stood between Min-jun and Jin-ho's body, my gun pointed point blank. The tears dried on my cheeks, replaced by an icy fury. This man had taken everything from Jin-ho. Trust. Home. And now he was trying to take his life. Min-jun slowly lowered his machine gun, looking at me with mocking, almost admiring interest. Brave. Foolish, but brave. Jin-ho always knew how to choose unusual allies. His gaze slid over my trembling but unwavering hands. Drop your weapon, girl. You've won my respect. I'll give you a choice. Die quickly, like him, or join me. I value loyalty, even someone else's. I will not join a traitor, I breathed out, my finger on the trigger. He sighed with exaggerated sadness. Too bad. Time slowed. I saw his shoulders tense for a lunge. I saw his finger reach for the trigger. I knew I was going to die, but I would take him with me. And then the roar of a gunshot rent the air. But it wasn't Min-jun's shot, and not mine. The office window shattered with a crash. Min-jun howled in pain and surprise, his machine gun flying from his hands, his wrist a bloody mess. A sniper, the one Jin-ho had whispered about. Min-jun, growling in rage and pain, grabbed his mangled arm. His gaze darted to the broken window, then to me, filled with animal hatred. He lunged at me, his good hand trying to reach for the pistol in his belt. I fired. The first bullet hit him in the shoulder, the second missed his head by a centimeter. He recoiled, tripped over the threshold, and cursing, tumbled back into the hallway. I heard his footsteps, heavy and uneven, fade away in the depths of the penthouse. He was retreating, wounded but alive, and now even more dangerous. The adrenaline receded as suddenly as it had surged. My legs gave way, and I collapsed to my knees next to Jinho. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow. Blood continued to seep from the wound on his side. "Jinho, hold on," I muttered, tearing off my now torn and stained blouse and trying to plug the wound with it. "Help is close. Can you hear me? Your sniper, he's here." He didn't answer. His skin was cold and clammy. I crawled to the broken window, trying to stay out of the sight of the one who had just saved our lives. "Hey!" I shouted into the night. "Help! He's hurt. We need a doctor." No answer. Only the wind whistled across the glass of the skyscraper opposite. The sniper was a shadow, a tool, not an ally. I needed to get to the roof. Those were his last orders. I looked around the office. The hatch. Where was the hatch? I rushed around the room, moving furniture, feeling the walls until my fingers came across a nearly invisible crack in the ceiling, disguised as one of the panels. I stood on the desk and pushed aside the panel. A narrow passage opened, leading into darkness. Descending there with Jinho's unconscious body was impossible. I needed a rope, a cable, anything. Desperately, I searched the office. In one of the desk drawers, under a pile of papers, I found it. An old, worn tourniquet and a pack of styptic powder. He was always prepared for the worst. I returned to him, sprinkled the powder on the wound, which reacted with the blood with a hissing sound, and applied the tourniquet above the wound. I wasn't sure I was doing everything right, but it was my only hope. "Jinho, I need to lift you," I whispered, grabbing him under the arms. He was incredibly heavy. His muscles, relaxed in unconsciousness, felt like they were made of lead. I was sobbing with tension, scraping my knees on the broken glass, but I dragged him to the table under the hatch. Suddenly, from outside, from the depths of the penthouse, a new sound came. Not gunshots, voices, many voices. And not shouting, but giving clear, quick orders. And they sounded Korean. But these weren't the voices of the attackers. My heart sank. Reinforcements? Whose? In a panic, I climbed onto the table and peered out the hatch. Darkness and silence. Then, from somewhere above, came the faint scraping of metal. Someone's shadow momentarily blocked the faint light of the night sky penetrating from above. "Who's there?" I shouted, clutching the pistol. In response, a quiet young voice sounded from the darkness in Korean. "Don't shoot. I'm a friend. My name is So-won. Jinho's nephew. The sniper transmitted the signal. We've come to help." Nephew? Jinho had a family? A real, living one? A thin but sturdy aluminum ladder descended from the hatch. A young man of about 25, with intelligent, serious eyes and a face remarkably reminiscent of Jinho in his youth, descended into the office. He was followed by two others, dressed in black tactical uniforms. They looked professional and loyal. So-won, without wasting a second, knelt next to Jinho. His fingers confidently checked his pulse, examined the wound. "Blood loss, urgent evacuation required. Help me," he ordered his men. They quickly but carefully lifted Jinho and began lifting him through the hatch. I stood nearby, feeling superfluous, useless, watching as strangers carried away the one who had become everything to me. So-won turned to me. "Are you Lisa? Come with us." "Who are you?" I asked, still hesitant to trust. He never spoke of family. "Because he tried to protect us. Hide us from this world," So-won helped me up the stairs. "But we never abandon our own, especially when the clan elders make mistakes." We found ourselves on the roof. The night air was cold and fresh after the smoke and blood of the penthouse. A small, nondescript helicopter, its engine running, was waiting there. So-won's men were already loading Jinho inside. "The elders?" I asked, boarding the helicopter next to Jinho's body. I took his cold hand in mine. "Minjun was just a weapon, a chess piece," So-won said, taking the seat across from me. His face was stern. "The Council of Elders found Uncle too soft, too human. They decided he needed a firmer hand. Minjun was their candidate. They sanctioned this rebellion. The helicopter lifted off the roof, and the city floated below like a river of lights. I looked at Jinho's pale, lifeless face and realized that the battle we had just barely survived was only the first. The pursuit, the attacks, Taeyong's betrayal, all of it was just prologue. "And now what?" I asked, meeting So-won's gaze. "Now," he looked at my uncle, and the same steel fire I had so often seen in Jinho blazed in his eyes. "We will show them what true toughness is. We will give him back what is rightfully his." He turned his gaze to me. "And we will protect those he chose to protect. You." The helicopter flew into the unknown. Jinho fought for his life. And somewhere in the city, wounded but unbroken, Minjun hid. And somewhere in the shadows, powerful and impassive, the elders who had started this war sat. I squeezed Jinho's hand tighter. He was my anchor in this chaos, and I became his reason to fight. And as long as he breathed, as long as his heart beat, this war could never end. It was only just beginning. And at stake was no longer just our lives, but the soul of the man I had grown to love.